Welcome to Inspire Change, a new inspirational and motivational broadcast that strives to empower men in a positive way, designed to educate, empower, and inspire even the busiest individual on the go over that first cup of coffee. Please join me in welcoming Gunter, international psychologist, author, speaker, and producer.
Welcome everybody to this week's podcast. The first part of this podcast, we're going to focus on mindfulness. And the second part will be a little bit more on a topical issue, and I'll get to that a little bit later. So why mindfulness? Well, as you may remember from the last podcast, it is a way of initiating an effective strategy to deal with sort of crisis and chaos reactions that we get. Essentially, how to effectively deal with stress. The term mindfulness has been thrown around for a long time, essentially in psychology since about the 1970s, and it's been progressively more and more integrated into psychological practice and helping clients how to, in essence, deal better with the challenges in life. Now, what I want to do is I want to actually define mindfulness a little bit in different contexts, okay? Because it's really useful, not just in dealing with stress, but can have a very positive impact on anxiety, on depression, dealing with intrusive thinking, all sorts of stuff. Now, I know this from personal experience, having recently had, as you know, some surgery. I had my shoulder replaced. This sounds a bit dramatic, but essentially that's what they did. And one of the ways that I dealt with the discomfort, and I'm almost in a way reluctant to talk about pain because some aspect of it was really well managed through medication. But there was essentially in the first 3 weeks a considerable amount of discomfort that arose with intermittent pain. And when I talk about pain, it's that sort of acute pain that, you know, when you move, it stabs you sort of thing, okay? The discomfort, however, was a different story because it was sort of ever present. Now, one of the jokes that I made with my surgeon was that in many respects I felt that I was using pain medication more for my back, which was a result of lying on a hospital bed, which was one, too short, and secondly, the staff couldn't keep making it up because it was a plastic covered mattress and the sheets would just slide around on it and it would bunch up everywhere, and it was basically really, really uncomfortable. And given a very fragile back from surfing, I was in a lot of discomfort a lot of the time. So in that context, one of the things that I did was from time to time put myself into an extremely mindful state. So what does that mean? Well, basically, it means that I'm going into an active, open attention to the present. Now, a lot of people might go, well, why would you want to do that when you're in discomfort and feeling pain from time to time? Well, one of the big things about mindfulness is that we need to exercise, firstly, awareness. And if you think back on some of the podcasts that I've done before, awareness, self-awareness is everything. Okay? Now, the other part to this process is acceptance. So acceptance is my ability to observe and accept rather than judge or avoid my streams of thought. Okay, so how does that look like in action? Well, lying in this really uncomfortable bed, it would have been very easy for me to focus persistently and consistently on how the bed's terrible, how my back's aching, how that's not doing my shoulder any good, how they should really have bigger beds for bigger people like myself, I mean, I'm sure the bed was designed for someone who was less than 5.5 feet long. I'm being a bit out of line here, but it felt like it was really small. Short, in fact, is the word. Now, I could have dwelt on that persistently. Now, the question is, would that have actually helped, firstly, my mood, secondly, my physical discomfort? And the answer to both of those is no, it wouldn't have made a great deal of difference. In fact, the chances are that it would have made things worse. Firstly, because my stress levels would have increased. And so my muscles would have, in fact, increased their tension, which isn't, under the circumstances, going to help a lot. So I really chose, and this is the third element in mindfulness, I chose through intention to focus on embracing the moment without judging it. Now, obviously that from time to time takes some practice. And, in my lesser than good moments, it took a little bit more work than it did at other times. Now, what I was lucky with was that I've had 30 years of practice with practicing mindfulness, doing meditation, spending a fair amount of time in self-awareness. So all of that history really helped me to utilize mindfulness as best as possible. Now, what I'm going to challenge you to do, in essence, is I want you to take 30 days, and during that 30 days, I want you to, every day, spend 5 to 10 minutes doing a mindfulness practice. Now, I could give you those practices, but the reality is that there's heaps of these exercises on the internet. Now, very, very simple start with this is to sit down or lie down and just allow yourself to be present and conscious in your breath moving in and out of your body. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you want to practice abdominal breathing. All you need to do is sit and allow your breath to move in and out of your body and to be aware of it and not to buy into any judgmental or critical thoughts that might be going on in your mind. Now, obviously, we can do a lot more with that, but a lot of times the more difficult we make things, the harder it is to keep those practices up. So my experience is try and keep this as simple as possible. In learning to meditate, one of the simplest forms of exercise is to begin with a 5-minute candle flame exercise where your attention's engaged with the flame and you are sitting there in relationship to the flame and allowing that to be all-encompassing in your awareness. So that might be a start too. That could be a place that you want to begin doing your mindfulness practice, the beginning stages to meditation. So remember, not only is this good for your mental health, but it also has a positive impact on you coping with stress physically. Your heart rate drops, your parasympathetic nervous system is more engaged, your muscle tension reduces, your adrenals slow down. And so you start to begin to experience a greater sense of well-being. And yes, the stuff around it, like in my case, the pain, the discomfort, the bad bed, all that doesn't change. What I'm changing is my response to it. And I think that's a really important aspect to dealing with any crisis or with chaos in general. We too often get caught up in it shouldn't be like this, it should be different. That is, generally speaking, not helpful. So in this part of the podcast, I want to talk a little bit about something that's very important, I think, in the current sort of circumstances, both politically but also socially. And that is the idea of what is truth. Okay? In this particular period of history, we have seen people make statements such as truth isn't the truth, that truth basically is whatever you want to make of it. So that there's this conception that there is no such thing as the truth. Now, let me put my cards on the table straight away. And that is that fundamentally I'm trained as a scientist practitioner, and on top of that, I would probably describe myself as a skeptic. Okay, so what am I talking about here? Well, firstly, my definition of the truth is fundamentally that truth is the property of being in accordance with fact or reality, that it has some correspondence to what is. Not what is imagined necessarily, but for what I have evidence for. Okay, so in science, one of the things that we tend to do is we establish a hypothesis, and then we go out and we create a methodology and we research it through gathering of data. Okay, so as a scientist, I have a very particular view of what research is. Research is not sitting on the toilet scrolling through YouTube or through some obscure webpage on the dark net collecting ideas and notions, opinions that seem to correspond with my own ideas and notions. One of the things that we talk about in science is the falsifiability. That is, I need to be able to also disprove things, not just prove them. And, in psychology, we know of a situation basically called cognitive bias. And that is, if I'm not careful, i.e. I don't have the right methodology, I'm more than likely going to collect opinions that verify my already existing belief. Right? So why is this really important at the moment? Well, one of the things I've been trying to establish is a really good way in which we can deal with issues like COVID-19. So it doesn't drive me crazy or drive others crazy. But in our current historical situation, we have people in our community who are disseminating untruths, or let me be blunt, lies. There's no other way of describing that, really. So it's been well established that COVID-19 is not some manufactured virus. Now, on the political front, certainly in the United States, the conspiracy theorists like from QAnon and right throughout, and it's been driven by a large part of their leadership, is that somehow there's this massive conspiracy going on to defraud Trump from his legitimate place in the leadership of the presidency. Now, that's all very well, but in both cases, where is the proof? What is the evidence? And it appears that the people who are subscribing to these particular positions are not able to substantiate their position with fact. It is based on opinion, it's based on circular arguments, it's based on attacking whoever opposes that particular point of view. Now, in my mind, that is particularly dangerous. And so one of the things I want to encourage everybody is check your facts. Facts are not interchangeable with opinion. Fact is a fact. Let me put this into context a little bit, is that since we've had vaccines, more people are alive from having had the vaccine